Welcome back to BLOCKTV. As a new week begins, a new reality is setting in. More and more nations, businesses, and individuals are beginning to come to grips with the ramifications of the spread of COVID-19. And everyday life takes a new and unfamiliar challenge, from massive workplace and institutional shutdowns and organizations to dealing with scarcity, either real or assumed, to practicing social distancing. Life, let's face it, as we know it, has changed for the foreseeable future. Now, at the time of this taping, the World Health Organization counts nearly 160,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases. This is a Sunday early morning in the Middle East. Now, around the world, the numbers right now for deaths are 5,839, while 70,000 cases confirmed have recovered. Over the weekend, many countries instituted severe measures, from Italy practically shutting down the entire country, the United States banning incoming air travel of non-U.S. citizens, as much of the world has done. The rest of the world following suit, France, Israel, and other countries limiting the workforce and so forth for the foreseeable future. Now, one of the biggest challenges, perhaps second only to the health threat, is the economic fallout. The world is entering a recession. There are few who doubt or can deny that now unemployment or underemployment is a fact of life for millions of people around the world. As many industries come to a screeching halt, consumption reduction follows and lifeblood of the economy dries up. Already the situation has wreaked near unprecedented havoc on the markets, and so far, state action has been less than effective at remedying things. Through it all, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, the invention inspired by the last global depression nearly 10 years ago, have so far proven less than effective as an alternative. One needs to look at the price of Bitcoin from the last week to see that it disappointed, to put it mildly. Is the digital assets industry as dead as the tourism industry, or will the determination and ingenuity of the sphere keep it relevant and perhaps vital in the weeks and months to come? Now, to answer some of these questions, pressing questions, we gathered a panel of industry pros. Let's start with that can offer us a big picture perspective on the state of the sphere. And joining me in the studio, in the right distance, is Ido Sadeh Man, the founder and chairman of Saga. Hello to you.
Hello.
With us also, and I'm very grateful to you for coming, is Danny Leon, the co-founder of Celsius. Great to have you with us.
Thanks. Good morning.
Gentlemen, at the end of the day, the last time I had you, was a different, what a difference a 3 months makes, so to speak. Back when you guys were in the studio, Bitcoin was trading at $7,000 and on the way and up. The topics we were discussing were the developments of CBDCs, the adoption of decentralized finance, and government crackdown on exchanges. Boy, oh boy, what a difference a few months make. Now, I really have to start, though, with the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room. I entered this sphere very, very excitedly a year and a half ago. The narrative behind it made me hopeful that what I saw wrong in mainstream, let's say in media, or both say finances, can be fixed. We are into a crisis that the sphere was expecting, and said that Bitcoin, the phrase "Bitcoin solves this," was waiting for a day like this. Boy, oh boy, were they wrong. Convince me how that narrative, that speculative bubble of 10 years, did not just burst.
So, I do think they were wrong. I think that this perception that because Bitcoin is uncorrelated with the rest of the global markets, especially with national agendas, would make him the best safe haven for times of crisis, proved wrong, and rightfully proved wrong. In the sense that it is only logical if we believe that tomorrow morning the entire world would look like Venezuela. Right? In Venezuela, people are buying Bitcoin to buy products in the store because their entire world is havoc and their state actually vanished. And Bitcoin
and yet not enough. And
Sorry?
yet not enough.
Right, but still in countries like this,
okay.
we see
part
Bitcoin,
of the population
right,
acting somewhat
right.
as such.
With your chaotic with your presentation of the chaos that the world is going through, we're still not there. We still want to hold the currencies that we can buy stuff with tomorrow morning. we want to be able to buy the alcohol that is so sorely missing in the shops, and that is not going to happen with Bitcoin, not tomorrow morning. And I think that what we're missing is the gradual transition. I think it is clear that the world we're going to see tomorrow is different from today, but it is going to happen gradually.
But Ido, what if gradually, what if gradually goes out the window? What if gradually is not an option anymore? Because let's say tomorrow morning, it's even more severe measures. I'm taking worst case scenario, but some countries are moving very bloody fast. In Rochester, I think in upstate New York, there's already the National Guards in the streets. You know, we are a click away, one could argue, we're a click away from that being the case in other places around the world. Maybe Bitcoin dies because, let's face it, gradual is no longer an option.
Look, I don't know. I think that it certainly hasn't performed as expected, as you know, safe haven that does not correlate to other asset classes, and we all kind of expected that this, you know, when a black swan like this happened, the notion of Bitcoin was saved the day. It hasn't happened. I think that proclaiming it dead is still premature. Let's look at what happened. Yes, it did not serve as that safe haven, but there were several events that have impacted Bitcoin that I think the safe havenness of it, considering the alternative that Ido has discussed, were not strong enough to give this to me as an alternative, right? So first, liquidation. Investors were liquidated in almost every single asset class, and guess what? When you need cash, you sell what you've got, right? And Bitcoin was one of those.
Just matured into a digital asset.
Exactly. Then you had this oil crash between Saudi Arabia and Russia, and we know the role that Bitcoin play in that part of the world. And as people sense this uncertainty, they're like, well, it's time to sell. We also know that there were a bunch of speculators, and I think the issue with this industry is that it's still filled with speculators that were looking at this asset and were like, you know, maybe it's time to take some profit on top of this liquidation notion. Maybe the recession is indeed coming, and I need to sit on cash aside because I don't know when this thing is going to end, right? So it's this, and then you've got the Plus token debacle that kind of flooded the market with all this Bitcoin, and that did not help.
I'm going to push you guys to the limit even more. We're taping this on a Sunday, folks, gentlemen, pardon me. Monday, you know, I'm very worried about the opening of the markets on Monday, because we have no idea what, you know, if we're looking at another crash in that respect. All these things that you described, scenarios, indeed, you know, liquidation not there yet. People are freaked out. They're selling every single asset that they have. Let's say this continues for another month at least. If you're listening to Angela Merkel or to the people in Europe, that we've got at least 14 weeks ahead of this. At least 14 weeks ahead.
14 weeks of the impact of
the
COVID-19.
impact on the of quarantines, of you know, limited workforce coming out, whatnot. Do you think that Bitcoin can survive that before we touch on the rest of the economy?
Yes, I fully agree with Daniel. Bitcoin is not dead, and I would very much caution from looking at today's data and marking a trend. If you look at the dollar price, it is rising, although it is rising against the renminbi, for example. Although if you compare the Chinese reaction to Corona and the US reaction to Corona, I'm not sure it justifies the dollar rising and not the renminbi. But we have a lot of technical effects, right? People are liquidating their stock markets, they're liquidating into dollars and US bonds. And so the amount of noise in the system is tremendously high. And the number of variables, how many sick, what is the contamination rate, what are the measures that several governments are taking. There are so many variables that I think that trying to predict a trend at this stage is ludicrous.
Go ahead.
It's also because we don't know what we don't know. This
Exactly.
can be worse than 2008. And I think that when you look at what's happening, and the way, again, you know, you've got COVID that has hurt supply, the economics, right? The supply side of the economics. With China interrupting the supply of the various materials and products from all around. And what we're seeing now with these various measures, that this supply side impact is slowly infiltrating into the demand side, right? As, look, let's just take social distancing. How many people have taken Uber today? How many have taken? How many people? No. So you've got this huge impact all around the world. As more and more people work from home, they spend less time on restaurants. They spend less time purchasing these various items, going out, and look, you've got businesses expecting that slowdown to continue to start laying off as people are laid off. And I think the most concerning thing to me that I think kind of goes back to what Ido was saying is that central banks are very limited at what they can do to impact that demand side if we indeed were going in there, and we're going to that, right?
Right.
Look at monetary policy, and Ido will talk a lot more about that, right? They're running out of ammunition, right? Interest rates are already in historic lows. Look, so the world is going to be relying on fiscal policy?
No. I mean, but so let's talk about government actions, because little as many in the sphere like to admit it, they still have a large role to play in the economy. But I want to talk about government actions, because we're seeing essentially all the stops that were put in place supposedly in 2008 are being tried again by the legacy system.
Yep.
I can argue, with mega printing on one side.
Unbelievable.
I mean, and that's something that is quite scary. You do.
I think we're far worse, because if in 2008 we could count on coordinated action,
This is not
now we're
coordinated.
left to Twitter tribalism.
Right.
So the idea that China, the US, and the European Union would coordinate an action is rather funny. But not only that, we are facing this crisis with empty war chests. Interest rates are looming towards zero, either from the negative or from the positive side. And so the war chest of a central bank is very much exhausted. I think, and if I take anything currently from the crisis, we really don't know much. It is the back to
but
basic.
arguably that does not work.
Back to basic. And for me, from a monetary standpoint, back to basic is diversify. The control we have, the control our governments have over the situation seems quite negligible. As much as we go to basic and buy toilet paper, because we don't know what we'll find in the supermarket tomorrow, we should diversify our assets, because it's really
How do
very
you
hard
sell
to...
that notion? First of all, I tend to agree, but look at what's happening worldwide right now. Exactly as you said. People, toilet paper is becoming the new asset. Okay? So people will react psychologically, en masse. We're in the age of social media, which sadly, I'm sorry to say, is not really acting responsibly in this matter, because there's so much disinformation out there. So how do you sell to people the notion, okay, this is the time to diversify?
I don't know. I think it's pretty obvious.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, the challenge is that if almost every single asset class
Because on
is
mainstream
going down the
legacy
toilet,
media, you're hearing, don't do anything. You know that.
don't do anything.
Don't move. Don't do anything. Yeah.
I don't know. I've been. We should be very careful taking other people's advice. And that
Entirely,
includes
and
both
that's
of
important to
ours
note
here.
everything.
But look, I think it is very, very challenging. What the tools that we've got available to deal with this, and we should be modest enough to also say that we just don't know. This is
Entirely.
this type of black swan that we just don't know.
That we don't know it. Actually, I want to touch specifically on both of your projects before we even expand it outwards. Saga. Okay. Again, this could have been the perfect opportunity, or might be the perfect opportunity for Saga, but I'm assuming that all of us at the end of the day, we're all startups. How are you dealing with this? How are you marketing this to be diversified into Saga?
So we start by the very basic, which is protecting ourselves, protecting our people. We were ahead of the curve in allowing people to work from home and allowing the organization to function in a way that is completely distributed and decentralized. And I think that here the decentralization notion is working quite well on our for us. But we created Saga with this idea in mind, with the fact that a single currency is not stable. This is why we chose the SDR, the basket of currencies that central banks have been using for 51 years now to stabilize their asset when they don't know. When you have a very specific hedging strategy, you need to choose how to hedge your money. But when you don't know, you need to spread it in a way that makes sense from a risk perspective.
Yeah, I'm looking at the SDR composition, which is also the makeup of your coin. And at the end of the day, yes, and I'm stating Saga also, created almost for a scenario as such. And
I just want to be accurate. We didn't create the SDR.
No,
the IMF created
the IMF
it.
created the SDR.
Yes.
No. I'm talking about the Saga coin.
Right.
But also, when it comes, to Daniel Celsius, how are you guys dealing?
It's been challenging, to say the least. Right?
I-
I mean,
yeah.
The biggest challenge has been on the loan side of the business, with people taking fiat loans, and we've had margin calls all around, and we've tried to work with users and communicate and over-communicate that some of those loans will be expiring and some
Right.
of those loans will have to face some form of liquidation. It has been really tough. On the hodler side of the business, we've seen more and more people, and again, because the typical person that puts money in our quote-unquote is your typical hodlers, $10,000 to $20,000, and these people believe in the long-term viability of this industry.
And then the ability of this industry, just to, companies looking to, when it comes to DeFi, DeFi had a terrible week. See
DeFi
that
had a terrible week.
rebounding?
Hard to tell. I think that DeFi is here to stay. This will take some time. I know a lot of people lost trust in that system, and it will take some time to regain that trust. We've got a lot of work ahead of us.
And probably not throughout I'm sorry to state this, that's my fear, not throughout the next coming 14 weeks.
I do want to put things in perspective, right? Less than a year ago, Bitcoin price and the entire economy market cap was lower than it is today after a crisis. I think that the crisis, the trust crisis, is mostly rooted in the expectation of us being
Of
the
the
solution,
asset,
and we're not as mature as we thought we are to be the solution. It does not mean that the industry is dead. Nothing on the fundamental side of things has changed.
It's not, but I'm arguing that maybe if, maybe it lost the narrative of being the solution and just became a mature digital asset.
Temporarily, I just think it's too early to make that type of conclusion.
Now, amen to that, guys. Seriously, amen to that. Looking ahead, though, the community as a whole, it would be said that the cryptosphere was more aware and better attuned to the coronavirus challenge than many others. Would you say that that's the case, that it's true?
What's true again? Can you?
Basically, we're better prepared, not just because we're paranoid freaks, but because, as you said, Ido, because we can actually work from remote places.
Correct.
You
As
know,
an industry,
I
yes.
can't believe I'm
As
quoting
an-
CZ, but nobody really needs an office.
That's right.
But yeah, I definitely think it's true. I think it's a combination of several key factors. One, the trust in these institutions. If you look at this industry, the trust in these institutions to begin with is not the highest. And therefore, when the general public fails to be able to trust the ability of states and institutions to provide security, this is already the baseline of this industry.
Right.
The second thing is decentralization. We're really capable, whether it is because we're fully digital, but also because of the narrative of decentralization, we're really capable to work together without having a central coordination that is so required, like the mere concept of an office. And I think that this combines, puts the industry in I don't see the crypto industry or the blockchain industry in paralysis. I do foresee it for many other industries in a blockade situation.
In the blockade situation, my lord, I cannot believe. I mean, first of all, before I continue, it's insane that we're discussing this. There's a moment of, jumping out of the anchor hat. But if we get to the blockade, speaking of blockades, clearly one thing that went out the window is conferences, which are also part and parcel of this industry. It's not just where the community gets together, or it's where the community moves things along. It's where ideas come together. Now that's dead. Do you see yourself, if there's still again, consensus, New York City, I think we're going to hear the death of that.
Probably.
Canceled
They just
canceled everything.
South by Southwest.
South by Southwest
this
is
just
insanity. Everything
insane
is
to me.
virtual and
Yeah.
virtual. How much of an impact does that have?
Overall, I think that in the long run, a positive impact. I think that what we're going to find is that a lot of our education, which is 200 years old, a teacher versus a classroom, is going to change. Many parliaments in the world are unable to vote remotely, and this is definitely going to change. And I think that in terms of conferences as well, I think that
I know, but there's even in that, I'm gonna case argue that. Look, we're sitting here in the Middle East where apparently the government instituted, let's not open this too much, but digital tracking for civilians over the course of the last several days. Nobody winked. Nobody said a word.
Right.
Everyone's okay with that. Hold on, it's an election year in the United States. People will argue that they will say that they cannot go and vote, that they can. So we're looking at a possibility of geopolitical order changes that aren't very democratic. I'm just saying. I keep playing hardball.
Yeah,
I know.
let's go back to conferences as
Okay.
it's related to this industry. Look, We all have been traveling, we've all been to these conferences, and in a way it was one big cop-out. Why? Because we've been talking to the same people. It was really convenient to go from one place to the other. And I think that it's time to push our marketing thinking outside the box, and I think it's a good thing. Because now, look, I see it with my marketing team. Suddenly conferences is not a marketing channel. And
Right.
suddenly we're being forced to think outside the box. Okay, so how do we finally speak to an audience that is not typical attending these conferences, right? And what I like about a project like Saga that I think kind of bridged the gap between the crypto to the traditional world, right? And that's why we're going to be adding Saga to our wallet as another way to give the Celsius users to diversify their offering.
To diversify, because that's the thing to do right now. I actually do tend to agree. I think, let's face it, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly.
And
Definitely.
and it's more important. It's the most important. The project like Saga and Celsius actually plug along right now. Finally, let's look ahead when it comes to rebuilding after the crisis is over. Looking ahead, what will happen to the idea of digital assets? There are definitely arguments to be made that non-physical, uncensorable, border-hopping money has many things going for it at a time when cash may be literally toxic. Developments of digital national currencies was already underway. CBDCs, look, needless to say, China obviously delayed its launch. I think, again, I'm theorizing, I know nothing, that they're chomping at the bits to bring it out, as fast as possible. Where are we after the crisis? CBDCs, cryptos, whatnot.
So I think it's very hard to be
Predict.
a prophet in such days. But what I think is, I'll tell you what we did in Saga just before the crisis. We started to address markets where currency and economy were shaking, markets like Argentina and Brazil and Turkey and South Africa, because we believe that we have a better solution for them. We have a basket of currencies, stable, etc. And what we realized a week ago is that what was true to Brazil and Argentina and South Africa and Turkey is now true to the entire world. The questioning of the things we thought most stable.
Right.
And I think that this is going to be across the board. I think that this is a sea wind change, and that many of our basic paradigms are going to change as citizens before we are a crypto industry. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the crypto industry, because if we have something working against us, it's not the logical reasoning, it's the psychological paradigms. We were all born, our fathers and mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers were born to a system that works in a way. And I think that this system is definitely going to change. I think that if Corona teaches us one thing, is that whether we like it or not, globalization is here to stay.
Yeah.
And while it comes with tremendous opportunities, it comes with a lot of risks, and we need to start addressing the risks. In 1980, the same virus would have been a Chinese issue. We would have heard it on the news, on Saturday evening news,
Thank you very much.
like we heard of people starving in Bangladesh. It
didn't
brought
touch us.
tears to our eyes, but it didn't affect our wallets nor our health. This is clearly not the case. And I think that the reorganization of a global market and global power structure is the next thing.
I also think that we need to ask ourselves a very simple question. What has changed when it comes to the underlying technology? What has changed when it comes to the digitization of currencies and tokens and crypto?
Nothing, but the people are yet to come.
The people are yet to come.
That's the only thing. And it is the time to seize the opportunity if you are within the sphere
Yes.
to diversify and make them come. Gentlemen, Daniel Leon from Celsius, Ido Sadeh Man from head of Saga, I cannot thank you enough for sharing this panel and the stage several feet away from me today. Let's hope we all get through this as soon as possible and listen to guys like you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep safe.
We were BLOCKTV.
Watch us on Amazon Fire TV and Roku.